Hello everyone, and welcome back to the next part of the tutorial which involves control structures. So in the previous tutorial we learned about simple programs involving if statement, if else statements and nested if statements, and also we learned about logical operators which are usually used in a typical if else programs. So after that, we also learned about for loops and how to iterate over a string and range function, which is commonly used in a for loop, and also how to combine a for loop and an if loop, if else statement. So here, apart from range functions and logical operators and iterating over strings, there are a few more commands which are commonly used in iterative type of programs such as for loop itself. So again, I'm going to consider the example which was previously used and create a list of fruits such as apple, banana, strawberry, and cherry. So as you can see here, these are highly case sensitive. Here apple, banana, and strawberry, these three do not have a capitalized string, but here I have made the first one as equal to capital just to show you people that how important it is to maintain the syntax accurately. So for x and fruits, if x is equal to cherry, sorry, it did not indent because I had missed a colon there. So upon typing the colon, it will automatically indent and stand in the next line. Sorry, we will start with break first and then we will go to continue. Now print x. Here, first let's try to understand what exactly this program is trying to do. Now that we have a reference list, which is fruits, the for loop needs to iterate over each and every element in this list. So in this example, these elements are nothing but strings. So once we have told a for loop, we have mentioned to the for loop the range in which it has to iterate. Next comes the if statement, wherein we are saying the if statement to actually match any given string with our target string, that is cherry. So if the given string matches with the target string, then automatically the program needs to break. That is, the program will exit from the loop and end the program. Or if there are successive commands, it's going to execute that. So now let us consider the example of the first one, that is apple. And obviously we know that apple is not equal to cherry. So the program actually ignores the break statement, because the break statement is actually used only if this if condition is satisfied, and it does not, so it's going to go to directly print x, which is nothing but apple. And in the same way, it is going to iterate over banana and strawberry, and automatically this is not going to be a problem and it is going to print all these three. But when it comes to the cherry, that is the last element, so automatically it breaks the loop and the program terminates, and this command is not going to be executed, which you are going to see now if I click run. So here you can see it prints apple because this command was ignored and this command was executed. But upon successfully satisfying this criteria, it has executed this command and it has exited the loop. In the same way, we can try to see continue as well. These are also some of the statements which are commonly used when we are trying to iterate. So for continue, again, I'm going to take the same example. And if I'm going to say that for x equals cherry, instead of break, I'm going to say continue. And just for the fun of it, I am going to actually change the order of these fruits. Okay, so now first let us run the program and see what happens. So here, as you can see, we had a list and we told the loop to iterate over that list, and we gave a certain criteria for an if statement to be executed. So if x is equal to cherry, that is if any given string matches the string, then it says continue, which means it has to leave that particular iteration, that is for that particular iteration and jump to the next iteration. But in case of break, what used to happen is that it comes out of the for loop completely. But here continue means that you are going to skip only that present iteration and you are going to run to the next iteration. Let me make it more simple. Now first I'm going to consider the case of apple. I will say that apple is not equal to cherry and I'm going to print apple, and same thing happens with banana as well. But when it comes to cherry, wherein the if condition is actually satisfied, continue means that that particular iteration is over and it has to go to the next iteration wherein x becomes equal to strawberry. So this is the significance of continue statement. And now we are going similarly how we saw a nested if loop, we are going to see a nested for loop. Now let us say I will give it as color is equal to, I'm going to create a list again, red, one of my favorite colors, and green and white. Sorry. Next I'm going to go with fruits and I will give it as apple, and then banana and pineapple. Okay, so now we have created two set of lists, and multiple for loops, or what we call it as nested for loops, are needed when you want the program to iterate over multiple lists or multiple dictionaries or multiple data frames, as you may encounter in the future classes. So we use multiple for loops when it has to be iterated over multiple lists. So now I will write the for loop for the first list, that is for x in color colon, automatically it indents. Then I'll write the second loop for y in fruits. I will ask this print x comma y. So we wrote one for loop for the first list and the second for loop for the second list. So let me explain the program to you. First it's going to execute this command. So for x in color, so it is going to pick red, and in red we are still in the iteration red, and then for y in fruits, so it is going to consider the first element, that is apple. So it types red apple, and same way it first iteration is still going on, but it will iterate for the second for loop, which will become banana, and it will be answer is red banana, and similarly it will be red pineapple. Upon exhausting the entire list of fruits, then it is going to the next iteration in color, which is nothing but green. So for iteration in green, it is going to completely exhaust the second list involving fruits. So this procedure continues until even the color list is completely exhausted. So our final answer should actually be white pineapple, which you can see here. And one of the most commonly used loops other than if else and for loops are the while loops. As you can see, we will start with a very simple example. Let us say I will assign a variable I with a value 1 while I is less than 6, print I, and then I will say I plus equal to 1. So let me run the program and then I'm going to explain it to you. So first we are basically starting the I value with 1. As long as the I value is less than 6, it has to go on printing that particular value of I. So here is the jump which we give after every iteration. So first it will come here, 1 is obviously less than 6 and it's going to print 1, and then the 1 gets added with plus 1 and it becomes the new value of I, and again it runs through the while loop and so on and so forth. So this is a very simple and very basic example of a while loop, and we are going to see a little more complicated one, it involving while loops. I will take the same condition for I less than equal to 6, print I, but I'm going to give another small addition. So here, what exactly it is doing is that, as usual, we start our I value with 1, we see if this condition is satisfied, then it goes going to print I. But the same value of I, if it is equal to 3, it has to break, which means it has to exit the while loop altogether. But if it is not equal to 3, then it is going to execute the last one, that is, it gets added plus 1, and then again it is going to execute the while. So you can see upon reaching 3, it has to exit the while. Similarly, we are going to see how we can actually use continue for the same example. I'm going to change here continue. I'm going to make a very small modification and I will tell you why this was actually done. See, if we take the same example as the previous one, there is technically no end to this. So now, let us say I want to stop the program. I'm going to press interrupt the kernel. So automatically the program stopped. So now, speaking of where exactly the problem was, is that now I gave my I value as equal to 1 and I see that my I value is less than 1 and I will print that value. So if I value is equal to 3, then it has to go to the next iteration and this particular statement will not be executed. So every time, since there was no new value to the I, because this statement was never executed, it went on printing forever. So that is why we interrupted the kernel, and one small change what we are going to make here is that I am going to take this command from here and type it here, and I'm going to say that this statement should be executed here. Now you can see the difference. First it took the I value as 1. Since 1 is less than 6, it's going to add 1 to that. And since 2 is not equal to 3, it's going to print I. But in the next iteration where I was equal to 2 here and it gets added 1, 3 is equal to 3, so it says continue, which means you have to, that is the end of this iteration, you can go to the next iteration. So 3 has not been printed here and this goes on till it reaches 6. So while loops are more like saying when to stop a loop. Okay, so that is about a simple while loops. Next we will go for functions. Functions are very important, especially when you are writing very long codes, and functions are mostly user defined. See, until now we learned about a lot of inbuilt programs or inbuilt syntax of Python, but Python is so flexible that it offers even the users to write their own set of programs and call it by using the name of that function. So without any further delay, I will just demonstrate how a simple function would look like. Let us say define my function name again. You have to be very careful with the syntax we are using here. So the syntax for defining a new function is def, and my function is the name of the function that I am giving, and anything inside the parentheses is actually the input which the function actually needs to execute. You will be seeing this in just a minute. Hello, I'm going to say and plus name. So this is my function. So basically what I'm saying this in this function is that if I give a name, so the program should be, we should be able to automatically print hello and that name. Okay, so I will just execute this command and keep it aside, and then I'm going to call this function, my function, and I'm going to give it as some name which I have to mention, and I'll mention the name as Shika. So now if I execute, it automatically says hello Shika. So these are one of the very simple examples of how to define your own function and then how to print or how to execute the set of commands. It's not necessary that every function should end with a print command itself, because I want to facilitate the users to understand what exactly is happening in the function. So most of the times we use print commands. Sometimes it could be returning a multiplicative operation as well, which we are going to see in the future examples. Now, in the same way, we can modify the same function wherein in this case, the function could actually take a single input value, but sometimes we are not sure how many of these names needs to be printed or how many times the same function has to be executed. Or in other words, we are not sure about the number of input parameters required for this function. So automatically, I am going to write it as define my function name. Then I am going to include a simple for loop. For I in name, I want it to print hello plus not name but I, because this is a simple for loop again. What exactly this function is doing is that we take a name, but we are not sure about how many names this particular function can actually take. But in the previous example, it was very clear that the function will take only one input parameter. Here, we are not sure how many input parameters it can take. So we have used asterisk symbol, and we say that the for loop needs to iterate over these input parameter, which is nothing but name. So now I'm going to simply define this function, and then I'm going to call the function, and I will give a set of names, say Vishal, then Sanjay, and so on. I can give Akash. Okay. So here, as you can see, it says hello Vishal, hello Sanjay, and hello Akash. So with a single click, we can actually execute this for multiple input parameters. So this is one of the advantages of using asterisk symbol when you are mentioning the number of input parameters needed for a function. Similarly, we can define a function for adding two numbers, which I will call it as addition. This is the name of the function that I'm calling. And I will say that this function needs two input parameters, and what it has to actually do is that return a plus b. Return is one of the commonly used syntax along with the define function. So now I have defined the function, but I can call this whenever I want, and I can say addition 3, 8, and it's going to fetch me 11. So it's not mandatory that every time I say a plus b, so on. So these functions are more generic, and they can be just called by just using their name and giving the sufficient input parameters. Now let us try to see a very simple and interesting example wherein we are going to write a program to classify whether a given city is a metropolitan city or not a metropolitan city depending upon its population. So this could be a little long program. So I am calling the function name as metro city, and that this function takes two input parameters, that is, one is its name and other one is the population, and it has to end with a colon, and if it ends with a colon it will automatically take indentation. Now I'm going to create a dictionary. This city is an empty dictionary wherein this has two set of labels, that is name, which I will give it as just name, and city, which is nothing but population, which is equal to population. So what I've tried to do is that first we will create an empty dictionary, and we will identify the list using these categories, that is name and population. So here, if population is greater than 20 colon, then it has to print A is equal to, like I said, percentage S is usually for string. Percentage S is a metropolitan city. And here again I have to open the percentage symbol and give an instruction to the program to take which particular variable. Or else, if this condition is not satisfied, then it has to print. I will take the same thing and I will say is not a metropolitan city, and in the end it has to return city comma A. Okay, now that we have defined a function, I will call the function by saying metro city, and I'm going to give the two input parameters that are actually needed. So as you can see here, it says that Shanghai is a metropolitan city. So let me explain you how this define function actually worked. So now first we try to define a function or a program wherein we are trying to categorize that a given city is a metropolitan city or not depending on its population. So now here this function can be called at any time depending upon the kind of city that we are trying to classify. So for that, first we create an empty list. This empty dictionary. This dictionary was actually created because these input parameter needs to be stored somewhere. So I am going to call on these input parameters by giving them certain labels, which we call it as name and population, and that is same as our input parameters. So upon taking these input parameters, the program is going to create an empty dictionary, and in that dictionary it is going to categorize this input variable name under this label and the input variable population under this variable, and it is all stored in the dictionary which is called as city. Now we are going to give it a criteria, that is if else statement, saying that if population is greater than 20, then you have to categorize it as A is percentages, which is nothing but that particular city is a metropolitan city. Else, if this condition is not satisfied, then it has to say that it is not a metropolitan city. Okay, whereas okay, now it's fine. So then in the end it is to return to us the name of the city, that is nothing but the entire dictionary. As you can see here, the entire dictionary has been displayed. Along with that, it says whether what was the A, that is nothing but whether we said that Shanghai is a metropolitan city or it is not a metropolitan city. So having done that, next we will take up a lambda function. A lambda function is a very simplest form of a function, and it can take any number of arguments, but it can have only one expression. So what does this mean is that in the previous example wherein we were defining a function, the number of input parameters is most of the time fixed. So here, in fact, the lambda function can actually perform operation on the same variable multiple times as well, but it cannot have a set of commands. So where exactly do we use these lambda functions is that within a function, you want the variable to perform certain minor functions within itself. So in such cases, we can actually use lambda function, and we will be learning more about it in these examples. And the syntax for lambda function is lambda in itself and lambda a comma b comma c, which we are saying that this has three input variables and it actually needs to perform this mathematical operation. So now I have defined a function there, and I will say that my function 1 comma 2 comma 3. So automatically it has added up and it says that it's fine. You can repeat the same exercise for even bigger numbers as well, 25, 36, 49. and it says it's 9:49. So, and you see, these are one line functions basically. It does not have set of chain of commands like how we saw in the previous example, wherein you have an if loop, for loop within the function itself. These are just one line functions. So now we will see an example wherein how we can use a lambda function within a user defined function. So sorry, define my underscore function. I will give it as n and return lambda a, wherein a is an input parameter and the operation it needs to perform is a into n. So now I'm going to run this and save the function, and I'm going to say x is equal to my function of say 3, and then I'm going to say print x of 2. So as you can see, it says 6. So what exactly we are doing here is that now I have defined a function, say my function, and we want multiple operation to be performed here because the value of n is actually just n here, but we still don't know what is the value of a. So what we did first, x is equal to my function of 3, wherein the actual result will be 3a. And then we gave the lambda function the value of a, which is nothing but 2, and it executed it to be 3 into 2, which is 6. We can repeat the same function for different input values as well, and it is going to fetch us 33. So with this we have come to the end of our next tutorial.